That's okay. Or whenever you're ready. There's your option. We can either get started now or whenever you're ready. Alright, cool. Let's get started now. I reckon that's the best option. What do you think? Awesome. Alright gang, let's just do the roll very quickly. Cool. How you doing? Emma. Wade. How are you, mate? Joseph. Yes. Alright. Elizabeth. David, where are you? There you go. Trish, there you are. Heather. Alana. Lana, you are, let me tell you what you are. I did some research. Now I know that the official Turtle Appreciation Society calls you a turtle enthusiast, but you are a chelanophile. Not taking it back. Chelanophile. So, chelone. See, I don't know if it's chep or chep. Oh, so you really are a turtle enthusiast. Yes, I don't have to tell you. So Chelonus is the order according to the Linnaean classification system of biological species. So you know, we Homo sapiens sapiens, turtles are on the Chelonus category. Right? Genus, species, order, it'd be genus, no? No, it doesn't matter. It's not part of the breed. And our frog enthusiast is a renidophile. You don't need to know that, not in this class, that's right. But, thank you. Emily, where are you? You're here, there you are. Christy, how are you? Brianna. Darcy. Laura Beth.
You can just call me Laura.
Laura, sorry. Kellyanne. Just Kelly. I'm sorry, they've given me all this stuff. Darren, rocking the flannel. How many have you got? You better have 10. You've got 8. How many weeks? We haven't got 9 weeks, have we?
Yeah, get a couple of ones.
Big question is, which one's the one you're going to double up on?
Yes.
We'll have to guess. The money's on. Alright, Melanie, where are you? I'm sure. There you are. Excellent. You were sitting here last time. Kayla.
Yep.
How you doing? Kate is here. Dominique, how are you? Laura. Danielle. Is it Danielle or Danny?
Danielle.
Yeah, okay. Ready? And Taylor. Alright, gang. Who did the reading? Who did the reading? I actually did it this time. Every other week for everybody.
No, I have been doing it.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I take it back. Who did the readings? Beautiful, excellent, wonderful, fantastic. Anybody notice a relationship between this week's readings and last week's readings and the week before's readings? Bourdieu. You gotta say it with the feet.
It always reminds me of bourgeois.
Bourgeois.
So I always get really confused.
Yeah. So there's actually a social class of the bourgeoisie,
Yeah.
but there's also an academic writer and anthropologist called Bourgeois, and he's amazing, right? I'm getting off topic, of course. But he basically hung out in South Central LA with these in a crack den. Right? Well, not a crack, it was like a crack house, so a big block of apartments, and just learnt about social justice, the kind of the forms of capital that inform people's choices, the forms of relationships within the crack den. It's pretty cool. So bourgeois is not just a social category, but a theorist, and I implore you to have a look at him. Really cool thing. Really well-written ethnography. For those of you in the ER class, you'll learn about the importance of ethnography and understanding social dynamics. But anyway, getting back on topic, what was it about? It was about habitus, yeah. Excellent. Habitus was certainly brought up in these readings. Maths groupings. Beautiful. You did do them. Ability groupings.
How it affected the students and the teachers' benefit.
Excellent. What else?
There was a correlation between lower streams and lower performance, high streams and high performance.
Beautiful. What was that correlation? That correlation can take at least one of, well, there's more than two options, but how do we explain that correlation between the people in lower ranked classes and the performance of people in lower ranked classes?
Well, some said it was the teacher's fault, and some said it was the teacher said it was the student's fault.
Right, so it's either the...
Blaming it on each other.
Yeah, so it's either because there's something wrong with the student or there's something wrong with the teacher. Yeah? I don't know if it's a simple dichotomy, but you've hit the nail on the head. By way of trying to understand this situation, either the teachers go, yeah, student's a bit crap, or the students go, yeah, teacher's a bit crap. Now, realistically, we know it could be a balance of the two, who knows? It'll be different in different situations, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. What else?
Really random. Something I really was surprised me in one of the readings. One of the schools were only teaching their kids one part of maths, but then were testing them on higher levels. So I didn't have that at my school, where our individual teachers set our tests, so we just got tested on what we had learned. So that was really surprising, and in my head I'm like, why would you test kids if you haven't taught them? So
Yeah,
to me that
that's
was
weird.
really
How are they going to do if you test
What-
kids on
like
something that
what's
you
that?
haven't taught them?
That kind of reminded me too of like circular reasoning, where you perform well on the test because you're not taught the right stuff, because you perform well on the test, but then it just, you can't get out. How do you get out of that cycle?
It's a vicious cycle. Oh, I love it. Hold on to these ideas of circular reasoning, a vicious cycle. Excellent. How
what's
the
circular reason?
It's like,
Was it in the reading? No, we
no,
were saying that.
like a circular logic. It's a logic that feeds itself, that produces the rationale for that logic anyway.
yeah, it justifies its own. So I say I'm right because I'm right, because I say I'm right because I'm right.
As in, so the kids were getting taught a small bit of the maths, and then were getting tested on everything, but could only complete that small bit of maths, so therefore were only getting taught, because I was still in that low class, were only getting taught that small bit of maths, but they could only complete that small, do you know what I mean?
And then they were tested on the basis of their inability to do the better maths, and then they were classified as being not good mathematicians, so they weren't taught very good maths, so they didn't perform very well in maths.
See how
So
it
they
goes
were-
round in a circle?
You see how it goes in circles? There's a circular logic, circular reasoning.
So I took it as like, so they had this exam with 6 questions and the lower classes were only allowed to complete 1 or 2, is that?
No, they couldn't complete, they're allowed to complete everything, it's just, they hadn't been taught the information to complete.
So that's awful, there's like a line of things being like, this one's already.
Inclusion and exclusion.
They do still certificate maths tests that far, like in year 10, do they not do that in year 10? Yeah, so like you can complete all of them, or there's some of them, like they go in stages, they like still do that in high schools when they're doing 16.
Yeah, I can never do the last one.
Is that because you couldn't do them, or because you weren't taught to do them, or because you didn't believe you could do them? You don't have to. All right. What else? What else? What did you guys take from the readings?
So we were just talking about that our school, as Melinda wasn't taught the same thing, but with mine without testing, it was grouped like that. So we actually had 2 different tests. So they had their test that only had so many questions, so they could complete all their questions, and we had the same test but then more questions. So they were only given their certain amount of questions, and then we were given more.
Right. So what is that? Let's link that back to the readings. What's the point? What does that do?
It allows them to get 100%.
Does it? What happened in the exam? What does it do to students when
Keeps
we
them at their level, they have to be at, not have to be at, but keeps them at.
keeps them at that
They
level?
can't improve.
Yeah, exactly. What else? What else did we take from the reading?
The kids know that they're in the lower group, so they don't try as hard because they think that they're not as intelligent as the people in the higher group, so they're not going to improve because they know they're not going to improve because they're in the dumb class, or
Use that circular logic. But how? How do they think they aren't that smart? Where does that come from?
Well, like, they used to do like your, level 1, level 2, and so now they've put on that you're not really meant to tell kids. But kids are smarter than you think. Like, if you have all the kids in the class that are really good readers and they happen to be in this group, the kids know that that's a good group. Even if you just say, this is the yellow group, it has nothing to do with your ability. They're not as stupid.
And it's not just based upon what activities they're doing. What else is shaping their belief that that they are either better or worse than other students? You are so awesome. That was the best answer ever. That was the best, most awesome ever answer. But you're not in a different group. You're in the same group as everybody. But awesome answer. Fantastic. Love it. That was so awesome.
The
Totally got it.
encouragement.
Huh?
In the higher groups, they had the head maths teacher or the principal or someone really important, so they had the good teacher.
Yeah.
Whereas the lower kids had a title teacher.
Not as tight of a teacher. Yeah. So what we've got is the skills of the teacher are brought into the classroom to improve the opportunities of the better students. But what else? Expectations, how they shape. Because remember, even if we have all the kids in the one classroom and we divide them into better students and not better students, right? What's the teacher going to do?
The teacher's going to try and push the students that they know, like they might think this student's going to be able to do this, and if they're struggling, they're going to push harder and harder until they're going to be able to do it. If there's a student that they're labelled as dumb or something, they'll just be like, nah.
Yeah, so the way that you interact with them is going to shape their expectations and their beliefs about themselves. Yes?
My younger brother, who was in 10, last year when he was in year 9, he was in one of the middle maths classes. And what they do at the school is obviously so the higher classes have the higher teachers, but the lower classes also had good teachers. And he was in the middle class, so he went up to the head teacher and said he wanted to be dropped maths classes just so he could have a better teacher.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting.
He doesn't even like maths, but he just knew he didn't like the teacher, so he dropped classes.
Well, listen, this is a point that was raised in the reading, wasn't it?
At the lower strands, they don't think maths relevant because they're not learning how it can be relevant.
What's that going to do to a student?
Make them hate maths.
Hey, Max, what's that going to do to a student? I hate maths.
I hate school.
I hate school. What kind of job are you going to get if you hate maths? Well, I hate maths.
I love maths.
I was thinking about this the other day. I always loved maths in primary school, but I was one of those people that if I got taught something, I could do it, and that was it. I couldn't put it in different situations. So I always loved it. I always got A's, and so I was like, oh, I'm good at maths. But then when people asked me to solve a problem, like a mathematical problem, I couldn't do it, and I didn't know what maths to use. So I always thought I was good at it, but I actually wasn't. They were just telling me I was, even though I wasn't putting it into context, but I didn't know that that was why I was learning that.
But it brings up some interesting points, right? Like if we rock up and we go, oh, this student's not performing at school, something wrong with the student. What do we call that?
Deficit discourse.
You're a legend. Deficit discourse. Why might that be important? Why might deficit discourse be important to an assignment you may or may not have to do that is due perhaps next Thursday, perhaps not, that is worth at least 35 or thereabouts percent or more. Why might deficit discourse be important?
Because the teacher has their already made up assumptions about what the child can and can't do.
Yeah, and those assumptions are that the problem rests with whom? The student, or their families, or where they come from. Yeah. So who's to blame when you subscribe to a deficit discourse? Ooh, who's to blame? Who does the teacher think is to blame? The student. Who does the teacher think is not to blame? Yeah, the teaching, the pedagogical structure. Yeah? And so the blame is with the student. The blame, give me some examples of how that blame might be with the student.
They don't listen.
They don't listen. Behavioural problems.
They don't try.
They don't try. Why don't they try?
They're not really intelligent.
Not really intelligent. Their brains aren't as good.
Or they care about something else more than maths.
Yeah. Do you reckon the teachers are saying that in a deficit discourse? If
I think so. I think if you have a lower class and say you have, I don't know, history, I'm going to be exposed.
It's like
They have all the football
when
kids
someone
in
starts a
class.
sentence with, I'm not racist, but.
No, I said I'm going to be straight. Just say you have a whole class of sporty kids
Yeah.
and they were doing badly because they had spent so long at a football carpool instead of being at school. The teachers, or they were more interested in something else. The teacher's just going to say, that's why they're not good at maths.
Yeah, okay, cool.
That's what I'm saying.
Excellent. Right. What about if it's something like they're intellectually they don't have the capacity, or they have a behavioural problem, or they've got they're autistic or they're on the spectrum. What kind of an analysis is that? When we attribute pathology or deficit to the student and we say, oh, brains aren't as good, ADD, autism.
Might be a bit of laziness on the teacher's behalf, like they don't want to look into why the student is like that. Maybe they have a behaviour problem for a reason, and the teacher's just going to blame it on the student because that's the easiest option.
Absolutely. But don't be afraid, don't forget, you've got to go easy on the teacher. The reality is you're sitting in class and someone's being an arsehole, basically. And you're just like, but it happens, right? And you've got to work with these dynamics that are happening here and there. And, you know, you're right. Sometimes it's because the teacher's being lazy. Sometimes it's because the teachers themselves overworked, underpaid, have all this stuff, and they have to resort to the easiest solution in trying to understand the situation. It's a combination of the two. It's important that you're aware of that, but it's also good to go easy on yourselves in the real practical world.
So could you say then the field itself doesn't accommodate for these larger social ramifications?
Beautiful. Okay, now we're getting to the stuff.
This wasn't from reading, but in terms of the field, there is at the moment a shortage of maths teachers in high schools, and so a lot of the maths teachers are from other curriculums. So PE teachers are teaching mathematics, or science teachers are teaching mathematics, and so if we don't have that, the teachers themselves aren't taught in that subject or don't know a lot, then they're not going to be worried about looking into the student how to teach them. And on the other end, a lot of the teachers I know at my school were very, very good at maths, but weren't very good at classroom management or teaching. And so is it the field itself then, mathematics teaching, that's the problem?
What did the reading say that was specific about mathematics teaching and ability classification?
I think 80% of the teachers want
80% of what teachers?
mathematics teaching.
What about arts teachers? English teachers?
9%.
So there's something even about mathematics itself that predisposes that field to categorical thinking, quantifiable constructions of, or quantifiable representations of things, black and white numerical assessments of stuff. Yeah? Something about the field itself that predisposes teachers that are into maths to looking at things from that perspective. Right? Even before you've gotten into a classroom. And then you get into the classroom and there's something about the field of the classroom which itself predisposes itself to particular forms of relationship between teachers and students. That if they are categorised as good students, not as good students, that will affect the way that the teacher relates to the student, the way that the parents relate to the student, the way that the students relate to each other. Yeah? So it shapes their expectations through these relationships that are structured by the rules of the game or the rules of the field. Does that sit well with you guys? Does anybody have a problem with that so far? It's amazing because in 3 short weeks you guys are now rocking Bourdieuian theory. I'm going to talk about this. If you're getting this, if this makes sense to you, you've done, it took me, a good 8 years to do. Get a sense of Bourdieu. So awesome, you guys are amazing. What have we got? The pedagogical structure, that frames the rules of the field or the rules of the game, shape the way people interact in that field. They shape the way people interact in that classroom. They shape people's expectations, their beliefs, etc. What do we call that? People's expectations, beliefs, their orientations, their sweet, yeah? You got it? And the habitus, those expectations of good student, bad student, crappy family, terrible community, are internalized by the student through the practices that are taking place in the field. So the way that the practices within the classroom, specifically the practices in mathematics classrooms, which are already predisposed to classification, categorisation, will affect the way that teachers act with students, students act with each other, and what that does is it shapes a heap of stuff. What does it shape? If I go to a maths class and I feel like I'm a poor performing student, and I'm constantly in these poor performing classes, what does it shape?
I think one of the kids was kind of saying that
limitations of what they can and can't do. What else is it?
A lot of them said they weren't going to continue with maths in higher, like year 11 and 12.
Shapes their choices. Now, are those choices from them? If they've been shaped by a broader structural set of structural limitations? Are they their choices? Or are those choices sort of been given to them?
It's a choice. I think you still have will and choice. You don't have to, it's not conforming to societal expectations, but to an extent you kind of are. You still have your own ability to make a decision, although you have people influence it, it's still your decision. Like someone goes Joe jump off a bridge and like it's the whole like if someone has a gun to your head and they they're gonna shoot you or shoot all that stupid like it's still choice. It's still you.
It's interesting. This and it's really a good point. It's interesting. Yes, we're going to build on this.
Yeah, just building on that, I think maybe as much as it is a choice, I think the people's perceptions of how people act towards these students makes them feel that their options are now limited.
Right. So, is it fair to say that whilst there is a choice, sorry, you go.
With that, I guess it is a choice, but then back to the reading, it's to do with their habitus themselves. So, whether in that class, in that social setting, do they know how to play the rules of the game?
Excellent.
Do they know that studying for mathematics is going to get them up higher levels, or does their habitus just limit them to that level?
You have it. Oh, sorry. Go.
They don't know what to study though, because they're only learning a little bit.
But then they don't know the rules of the game. That's what I'm saying. They don't know the rules of the field. If they don't know what to
And
study.
there's something in the readings that said,
social cycles of poverty, cycles of privilege, cycles of disadvantage and advantage. You are only allowed to have sorry, let me rephrase this. Dude, you can have wheat bix or toast.
Yeah.
That's your choice.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Well, it depends what's in the toast.
No, you can have wheat bix or toast.
Wait bix.
Wheat bix. Awesome. You made a choice.
Yeah.
You feel empowered?
Yeah.
You can have wheat bix, toast, croissants, eggs, bacon, smoked salmon, dumplings. What do you want?
Oh, there's so many choices.
Crippled by choice, right?
Yeah.
See, isn't there a choice? There's choice theory. Glasses.
There's
Choice
there
theory,
is. Human agency. Human agency is what Bourdieu is all about. Trying to understand human agency within structures, and the extent to which people can make choices within rigid social structures, and the extent to which people can manoeuvre themselves in the field and utilise their capital and their habitus to have a sort of social mobility to give them more choices. Yeah? But at the heart of it, not everybody has the same opportunity. Not everybody has the same capital. Not everybody has the same habitus. And so the way these things come together will affect the kinds of choices people can make, the kind of opportunities people have available to them, the kind of limiting beliefs that will shape their career trajectories. I can't be an engineer if I've never done maths, no matter how good I may or may not be at it.
I'm confused, so it's about the relationship between the habitus and the field. So does that then ultimately influence their capital?
Yeah, it's sort of like they're all related, right? So, so the habitus is internalised through practice. It's not necessarily a conscious thing. The way that you learn your place in the field is not because someone goes, "This is your place." It's by just doing it. Yeah, you learn who you are by being who you are. Does that make sense? You don't. It's not sort of like you wake up and you go, "Well, I'm going to be this person." I mean, sometimes we sort of do, but ultimately it's by being in the field, by practicing the practical engagement with the world that we learn. Our social position is determined, right? So it's, the habitus is internalised through practice. The field structures the way that we can live in the world. Yeah, the rules of the game tell us how we can live in the world. Yeah, our ability. So people are always trying to move around in this field. They're sort of struggling and negotiating different ways of getting better stuff and getting more stuff and doing other things and having opportunities, etc. And their ability to move around the field, their social mobility, their ability to move up or down social classes, is determined by the habitus, the rules of the game, and their access to social, cultural, economic, symbolic, political capital. Yeah? Does that make sense? And all those things are affected by, I mean, we talked about this, didn't we? Cultural capital is affected by education, language, you know, shapes your disposition, shapes the way you move around, right?
So that being an example of that is, say a student, there's two students who are in the lower class, but one has more economic capital at home, and so their parents get them tutored, and so they're able to move up that class, but the other student who doesn't have that economic capital won't be able to have those opportunities of being tutored or.
Yeah, what do you reckon? And even
And that's outside the field, but.
yeah, but it's in a broader field as well.
Yeah.
Even parents who think maths is important, that sense of importance is going to be given to the child. Yeah, so two kids who don't like maths, whether or not you give them a tutor, if one parent likes maths and constantly reinforces the importance of it to the kid, then that's going to give that kid a motivation to do better. So you're absolutely right. The economic resources, but also the social and cultural things within the home that shape that habitus, the rules of the game in that field of the family.
I'm not saying I agree with what I'm about to say, but
It's just a disclaimer.
yeah, using the example of the two kids and one being economically more better off, don't the social constructs that we construct for ourselves,
Do we construct them?
well,
Or they
you know,
give
we
it to us?
fulfill them and we're part of them, but we do things that make them there. Do you know what I mean? Like we're self-fulfilling prophecies almost.
Yeah.
Why the constructs that we have, especially in a capitalist society, we almost require one kid not to do better and one kid to exceed. Like we almost need that to function in the society we have today. Is that?
I'm not going to say
I
I
know,
agree with
I'm
this to begin with.
You need to have rigid separations between people. You can't have everyone going to university. You can't have that in the society that we have today.
Well, you can't, or we don't, and we are too afraid to challenge
What
that.
would happen to the service industry then? What would happen to, like, I'm not saying I agree with it.
Dude, how many people in the service industry are currently doing degrees right now?
Oh, yes, good point. But do you
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Let's talk about it. Let's bring it up. Okay, talk, respond to this. This is a really important point to make, because this is one of the arguments that's used to justify social stratification.
It's kind of like
This is
saying if you have like a group of people, you need to have one person that kind of says like the final answer. Otherwise, it's just going to keep going round and round. Like you have to have someone that's
Have
better
a
than.
king, right?
Yeah, because otherwise, like someone's going to make the final decision. Because as people don't always agree, and you need to have that person.
Who's that person though?
Well, like that's
Along
what.
with the power.
Yeah.
Who has the power?
It depends what field you're in.
So if someone's like.
Why don't we have more Indigenous Prime Ministers? Surely it's because, they aren't capable, right? Please, that's not what I mean. You know what I'm saying? We can look at this situation and say, well, the reason why we don't have more Indigenous Prime Ministers, or any Indigenous Prime Ministers, because you need to have social stratification for this society to work, and some people just aren't supposed to be at a higher level.
It sounds harsh when you say it that way. I think using Aboriginals as a no, I think it's a bad example because they represent such a small percentage of the population. Use South Africa, for example, where the blacks represent a huge portion, only black presidents, yet all the doctors, all the lawyers, they're all white. That's.
But that's a relatively recent thing though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good.
That's only been since the 90s. Sorry, you know what? This is an amazing discussion. I really want to continue this. As you can tell, I'm digging it.
I'm glad you weren't I did sociology before I did education. I'm glad you weren't my tutor because I would have stayed with sociology.
Oh, yeah. No, but I don't know your teacher in primary education, so that's awesome. We're cool. Everything's fine.
Sociology was so bad.
But listen, this is an amazing discussion, and the chapter brings this up a little bit. It talks about Marx, ideology, the way that ideology is used to maintain these social stratifications. That certainly the people that are at the top totally dig the idea that we need to have these stratifications, otherwise society wouldn't work. That's the people at the bottom.
The leaders
they have
are,
a bit.
the leaders are black.
No, but let's think about. No, we started with this society. People at the bottom don't think that this society needs to be stratified to work. And their perspectives and their values are just as important. It's only the people at the top who say, and remember, we are at the top. We are privileged. We can afford to look at this situation and say, you know what, this thing works. It's not broke. Don't fix it. It works. It works for us. Damn tootin' it works for us. Yeah? But that's not going to be the same impression as someone who's at the bottom. I'm drifting off topic, and I have a lot of things I want to cover. But oh, you guys are amazing. This is fantastic. But what I want to bring to the foreground is I want to build on your point that, you know, we have a stratified society. We have a stratified classroom that represents difference. It represents the fact that this kid, not you, now I'm getting into trouble, you see. That there are some kids that are better than other kids. Those kids that are better are just better because of some innate ability. The deficit discourse, right? And we assume that what we're doing is representing difference. This is the point that the capitalistic interpretation of social stratification involves. We're just representing difference. We're not all the same. We aren't all the same. This is true, right? But what someone like Bourdieu or Marx would say is that, in fact, we're not representing difference. We're producing difference and reproducing difference and reinforcing difference through this self-fulfilling prophecy, this cycle, this circular reasoning. Yeah?
Don't most people argue for difference?
Not everybody argues for difference. A lot of people do.
Or individual?
When you say difference, you mean inequality? Is that what you're saying? Difference?
Oh, so there's a difference between. So okay, these are other issues. These are issues of diversity versus equality. They're two different things. Sorry. So diversity is that we are all different. Equality is that we're all the same. Again, this is taking us down a different path, but we can argue that we're not all the same, but from, say, a Marxist perspective, we may not all be the same, but we should all be entitled to equal opportunities. So there's a difference there. Equality is not the same as equal opportunity. Fairness is perhaps more about equal opportunity.
And equity.
Equity?
Yeah.
Yeah. Access and equity. Access to the same opportunities. Right? We're drifting a little bit off the topic. I'm getting goosebumps. But what I want to do very quickly is and we kind of have touched on it, is that on the one hand we have these deficit discourses that don't represent difference, they reproduce it. Yeah? So instead of just saying you're different, I'm just going to work with that, what we're actually doing is reproducing that difference where, you know, it may, kids may actually have the ability to do better in maths, but they don't get the opportunity to do better in maths. And because they're assessed at a certain age, that difference is reified, that difference is set in stone. And it keeps going all the way through their schooling career, to the point where it'll shape their opportunities later, after school as well. Yeah? Kind of jobs that they can get. So, what have I got? Yeah, so grouping it creates differences rather than just representing it. There's a whole heap of stuff in there. And through the structure within the field, those differences are sort of set in stone. Different people at different points in their lives try to get a bit more mobility and challenge that structure. But the point is that you can only really challenge that structure if you have access to certain forms of capital. Which is why we like to talk about the fact that all kids are equal, but they're not. Not all kids have the same virtual school day. Yeah, not all kids have the same opportunities in all the different fields that they inhabit, all the different habituses. Yeah? And so for us to turn around those pedagogical structures that reinforce difference, that actually produce difference rather than simply representing it, you have to look into their virtual school day to see what resources they have available to them. Instead of forcing them to conform to the structure, the pedagogical structure of deficit discourse, we can look into their little box of tricks and turn it around. Why would I be saying all this stuff about those 3 wonderful ideas? Who can tell me?
No idea.
No idea? Who can tell me? Come on, use your words. And you're all just furiously writing it down, aren't you? I will remember what I said. Tell me. Why?
For our assignment.
Tell me more.
Create a digital story.
Yeah, tell me more. It's sort of a dual exercise. One is I want to see that you can understand what these concepts are. The other thing is I want to see that you understand why they're relevant to the assignment. Why? Tell me, what are we doing in our assignment?
Making up a story.
Yeah, but what are we doing in our assignment?
Making up a story.
We're making up a story.
And saying how it relates to them three things.
There we go. Yeah? So it's important to be explicit. You are going to create a digital story that addresses all three themes? At least two of the three themes. What are the three themes? Excellent. So you have to do at least two. Does that mean you can't do three? You're awesome, yeah? Who did the, what did you think of the reading?
I like it.
Liked it?
This has been the easiest area. I think it's really understood.
You know what? I actually found this quite difficult. Because it was, so we all find things, like we all have a different take on readings, and that's okay. You know, like I found the first week really easy, you guys found that really hard, you found this one easy, I found this one hard. So it's okay to have these different interpretations. Certainly I like to think that the reason why this one was easy because it's been building, this idea of habitus and capital and all that stuff has been building over the last couple of weeks. In terms of how do they do it, we spent a bit too much time on what they do because it was awesome, but I'll just quickly cover it with you. So you got, when you think about how do they do it, you're thinking about the methodology they use, yeah? So you can all think about that in your own time. It's important to understand the methodology because if they worked out these ideas based upon talking to marketing students, it would have a different value. And it's important, and the reason why I'm reinforcing these three questions, they're going to come up as being quite important to you in another assignment, which I will talk about in a few minutes. In terms of what does it mean, who read the chapter? Yeah, what did you think of the chapter? Did it help at all?
It kind of like.
Yeah.
It let me. I was just saying to these guys that it gave me my definitions of some of those bigger words that I hadn't heard before. So
Yeah, cool.
when I went into lecture, I already knew what social stratification was. And
Cool.
I was like, oh, that makes sense now.
Awesome.
You have to remember like Marxism and that other guy for
And then I go, oh yeah!
they're not in the other one.
Marx and Weber. Weber.
Yeah, do we
Max
have
Weber.
to remember like their theory and how to
No, I don't think so. But then don't question me on that because I'm not setting the exam.
I'm the digital story guy.
I'm the digital story guy. Look, talk to Ken. I don't think. Talk to Ken.
So many words.
Max and Weber are hard to understand. Get a concept. Get a sense of the basics that are covered in the textbook, and I think you'll be all right. Yeah.
I reckon if anything, they'll ask for multiple choice questions.
Listen, let's not focus on that because we're running short of time. We have time to talk about the exams later on in the term. What I do want you to think about and what you have started to do very well in this class is you've been looking at the social dynamics and the habitus of the classroom, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Bourdieu, who writes a lot about education and who draws on Marx, looks not only at classrooms but also at social class. Yeah? We can superimpose these things that we learnt about stratification within a classroom or within a subject and say, well, you know what, that kind of applies to social stratification in the wider society, yeah? So it's not just something that happens within the classroom, this is something that happens outside of the classroom, and our access to opportunities will shape our attitudes, our dispositions, our beliefs, our practices, yeah? That in social society there are members of higher and lower social classes who have more or less opportunity to make empowered choices. Yeah? But in a class, and so the stuff we learn about the classroom helps us understand broader society. We can understand broader society, we can understand some of these processes in the classroom. And if we look at, say, a child and look at and go, there's a problem with this child because there's a problem with their brain, or they're psychologically deficient, or yeah, we apply medical or biological or psychological analyses onto the child, and we put the blame on the child. That's one way of looking at it. But in this class, we want you to take on a more sociological perspective. Yeah? So that's why when you look at why a child is not performing well, don't just look at brain doesn't work, something wrong with the personality, something wrong with, cognitive function. Look at it in a sociological context. That's what the assessment is asking you to do. Now, does anybody have a problem with the idea of what the sociological perspective is? Sweet. You need to nail that one. All right. I have allowed myself to go over time with this one. But having said that, I really enjoyed the dynamic nature of that discussion, and I really want you to pursue it and think about it in broader terms as well. What I'm going to do very quickly, guys, is just go through the instructions for the debate. Now, I don't think we need to do a mock debate, which was on the class organisation this week, because I kind of feel like we've been doing that anyway over the weeks. What I am going to do is talk you through the structure of the assessment so that you know what to expect when we come to class after term. Yeah?